Hi, I'm here today with Blair from Brava discussing leadership development and a new leadership assessment tool, BravtaTrak. Blair, welcome.
Thank you.
So Blair, why are first line and middle managers important to organisational performance?
Well, as it turns out, the research shows that up to 70% of employee engagement and performance is driven by a person's immediate manager. And it turns out that employee commitment to their immediate manager has a huge effect on three things. Firstly, their commitment to their job, which is basically their commitment to their work they do. Secondly, their commitment to their team. And thirdly, their commitment to their organisation. And that commitment is really reflected in the level of engagement and discretionary effort that a person is prepared to put in. Discretionary effort is that extra effort over and above the bare minimum that people need to do to get by. And if you think about a continuum, what we've noticed over the years is that effective leadership practices lead to higher employee engagement. That drives greater discretionary effort, which leads to higher levels of performance and organisational profitability. And if you think about most organisations, most people report to a first-line manager. And so those first-line managers are absolutely critical in terms of driving productivity. But more than that, the way those managers are themselves managed by their immediate manager, the middle managers in the organisation, is key as well. So in the end, first line and middle managers tend to be the key determinants of organisational productivity.
So true. So what are the common issues in terms of leadership capability?
Well, Dan, what I hear from senior managers is they perceive that first line managers are typically lacking in leadership capability. And they view them as good at process, but not so good at leading people. And the evidence within organisations tends to stack up to confirm that. What I notice is that across an organisation, there'll be quite significant performance variations between teams which are led by different managers. What I also notice is that some frontline teams miss targets, even though they've got great training in place and they've got effective management processes in place. I see, particularly from HR managers, I hear that the organisational culture or employee engagement surveys are delivering results which are much lower than desirable. And probably lastly, often I hear from senior managers that they see real opportunities for performance improvement, but they're not being picked up and plugged by those frontline teams. So it's interesting, there's the research in this area in relationship to leadership competencies has identified there's two types of competencies. The first type you could call price of admission. And those, by price of admission I mean, really you need to have these competencies to get the role of managing people. And so they're really competencies you're going to select for. But there's also other types of competencies which are referred to as competitive edge competencies. And those are ones that mostly it's difficult to find people who already have them. You have to develop them in people. And it's interesting, there's a few organisations who do research in this area. One of them is an organisation called the Centre for Creative Leadership, and another is a company called Lominger. And what they've noticed is the gaps in leadership capability are around these competitive edge competencies. And over the last 16 years, in the work we've done with organisations across New Zealand, Australia, and Asia Pacific region, what we've noticed is the same gaps in these areas. And those areas are things like leading people, inspiring commitment and motivating others, managing change, developing direct reports, confronting people in terms of their performance, building effective teams and establishing capabilities. Those would be the core gaps in terms of leadership capability.
Very interesting. What mistakes are organisations making with leadership development?
Well, the biggest mistake that's being made in most organisations is that conventional leadership development is primarily focused on leadership training. And essentially you could say that it's event driven. It's driven by that training event. And what happens as a result of that is there tends to be very little support for the long-term implementation of the leadership skills that people actually learn in those training workshops. So what this means for most managers is they go to the workshop, they go back to work, they try a few things out, but pretty soon they revert back to their normal management and leadership style. And in a relatively short period of time, most of what they have learnt gets discarded, and they end up applying very little of what they've learnt in that leadership training. And the consequence of this approach means that basically we see very little long-term performance improvement in organisations which take that approach. And of course, very little in the way of return on investment. And the reality is that the biggest challenge for most people managers is not understanding leadership. The biggest challenge they have is actually applying what they already know. And so what I notice is that most organisations are mostly focusing in the wrong area. Their biggest mistake is focusing on developing leadership skills without any real focus on helping managers to apply those new skills back on the job.
So right. What are the financial or bottom line implications of implementing sustainable leadership development?
Well, Dan, my contention, and there's plenty of evidence to back this up, is that effective leadership practices drive a greater employee engagement, which leads to higher levels of discretionary effort, which drives organisational productivity and profitability. And so if we start to take a look at employee engagement research, so you see companies like Aon Hewitt identifying that engaged employees, or more highly engaged employees, lead to positive outcomes in key business drivers such as customer satisfaction and increased sales. Another company who works in the engagement area, an organisation called Connects in New Zealand, have correlated higher employee engagement with things such as higher net profit per FTE, more productivity with less absenteeism, and more cost savings with lower employee turnover. And our own work with companies across Australia, New Zealand and the Asia Pacific area have also created similar outcomes. Another organisation who's well known in the engagement area is a company called Gallup. And what they have shown is that highly engaged work groups within companies outperform groups with much lower employee engagement levels. For example, top quartile business units have 18% higher productivity and 12% higher profitability than lower quartile business units. From a cost perspective, bottom quartile business units experience between 31 and 51% more employee turnover, which is a significant cost for any business. They experience 51% more inventory shrinkage, fancy name for theft. And they experience 62% more workplace accidents than those in the top quartile of workplace engagement. So clearly there's some compelling financial reasons for taking a more effective approach to leadership development, both in terms of increasing productivity and profitability, along with reducing costs.
I think you're onto something there. So Blair, how can organisations ensure sustainable leadership development?
That's a good question. Key place to start is with the proposition that for most people managers, the biggest challenge they face is not understanding leadership. Their biggest challenge is actually applying what they already know. And so if you accept that as true, then really the embedding of a strong leadership improvement culture is absolutely critical if organisations are going to significantly improve leadership capability and organisational performance. So essentially, in order to achieve that, leadership development must be regarded not as an event like leadership training, but actually as an ongoing process. So sustainable leadership improvement focuses on the application of leadership practices by managers. Effectively requires ongoing measurement of leadership activity, followed by action plans put in place to support change, and then ensuring there's targeted training and coaching to support the managers as they apply those new skills. And so in this process, leadership training becomes part of the total process designed to support the ongoing application of those leadership practices.
Sounds very effective. What financial gains have organisations benefited from by implementing your sustainable leadership development?
Well, the results our clients have achieved over the past 16 years can probably be summarised as follows. Higher employee engagement, higher profit per FTE, full-time equivalent staff member, more productivity with less absenteeism, and more cost savings with lower employee turnover. In terms of specific numbers, one of our clients had basically had increases against their annual KPI targets from around 98 to 100% of KPIs to consistently 106 to 108%. Another client increased their gross profit by 50%. Another saw sales leads increase by 123% in 4 months.
Wow.
Yet again, another increased their sales conversion by 25%. Another saw a 34% reduction in absenteeism, down from 572 days to 376 lost days per month. Another organisation who was focusing on debt collection, we maintained debt collection levels, actually we slightly improved them, while reducing their FTE levels by 31%. So what they did was they basically went from 48 staff down to 33 staff, and yet slightly increased their debt collection. Another client saw a 226% increase in productivity in 4 months.
Amazing.
Another's seen an increased sales, we're talking about a very large Australasian company, increased sales by 411% in 11 months. And another client continues to see savings of approximately $300,000 per annum through better service levels with fewer staff.
It's fantastic.